Hello and welcome to the installation video for BOLO version 15. This video will be lengthy as it will include both the installation instructions for macOS and Windows. Therefore, we will include timestamps in the description so you can easily navigate to the appropriate section of the video. Let's get started. Firstly, we will go over the installation for macOS. Since Microsoft SQL Server is native to Microsoft, we will need to install Docker to run it in its own contained image. Firstly, let's install Docker. If you already have Docker installed, you can skip forward to the Install SQL Server with Docker timestamp. The first thing we need to do is type Docker into Google. Our very first result will give us the Docker Desktop URL. Let's go ahead and click that, and that will take us to the landing page for Docker Desktop. Now, do be warned that this is a very large file and that you have to have at least 430 megabytes free to download this. Let's go ahead and download it, and we'll move to the next step. Once it's downloaded, go ahead and expand the folder, and then you'll be able to drag the Docker application into your applications directory. We'll then get this warning message saying that Docker is an app downloaded from the internet. Are you sure you want to open it? Go ahead and click open. Once we have Docker installed, we need to go ahead and increase the memory to 4 gigabytes because the minimum that SQL Server needs is 3.25 gigabytes. So to be safe, let's go ahead and set that at 4 gigabytes. You'll do that by going to the top of your menu and clicking the Docker icon, and here you'll go to Preferences, and then Resources, and then I already have mine set at 4 gigabytes, but if you don't, go ahead and set it. I'll just put 4.25 so you can see how to change it. Apply and restart, and that'll go ahead and restart the Docker desktop for you. Now, using our terminal, let's go ahead and install SQL Server using Docker. Type this command into the terminal. It is command number 1 under the macOS installation in the description. You need to go ahead and enter your password for this to work. What this is doing is downloading the SQL Server from Microsoft repository. Once this is done installing, we'll continue to the next step. Once that's done, let's go ahead and run command number 2. What this is going to do is going to run the Docker image that you just downloaded. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and continue to step number 3. Next, we can go ahead and run command number 3, which is docker ps. This shows us the Docker containers that we have running. If we installed everything correctly, we should be able to see our Microsoft mssql server running as a Docker container. Now, we need a way to communicate with SQL Server, and that is going to be with the sql-cli. If you do not have Node installed, please jump forward to the installing Node timestamp of the video. Now we are going to run command number 4, which is sudo npm install -g sql-cli. Again, you will need your password, and what this is going to do is install the sql-cli globally so that we can communicate with our SQL Server. Now, to connect to our server via the command line, let's type in command number 5. What this is doing, it's connecting to the server via this command mssql with the username of SA and the password of really strong password 123. If everything is working correctly, you should see this in the command line. Next, to ensure everything is working properly, let's run a simple command, command number 6, which will show us the SQL version. Here, as you can see, we have Microsoft SQL version 2017. Now, writing SQL commands in a terminal would be no fun, right? So let's go ahead and install a useful GUI, which is Azure Data. Now, Azure Data does not have the same capabilities as MSSQL Server Studio, but we would take what we can get. Therefore, we will need to write some SQL to add databases, users, and permissions. But don't worry, it's fairly simple. Let's go ahead and install Azure Data Studio. So let's go ahead and type Azure Data Studio into Google, and the first result would be download and install Azure Data Studio. Now, it is not a installation per se, it's more of a zip file, so it's a lot simpler. So go ahead and install that. Let's wait for that to download. All right, well, once that's done downloading, we'll go ahead and click it. It'll expand the folder, and we'll double click that, and it's just that easy. It'll go ahead and open the application once you accept it, put it in full screen, and we're going to go ahead and talk about how to connect to the SQL Server. Now, to connect to the server, we're going to have to create a new connection right here on the left. And if you see all the way here on the right, our server is going to be on localhost. Our username was SA, and if you look in the commands, really strong password. Go ahead and click connect. If everything's successful, you'll see that it is green on localhost. Next, we're going to talk about how to create a database for our BOLO application. If you go to the YouTube description and you go to the commands labeled database commands under the MACOS installation, you will see these SQL commands. Go ahead and copy all of those from start to end. So inside of the description, you'll see like this, start, end, and go ahead and copy everything in between those tags. Now come back to Azure Data Studio, right click localhost, click new query, and copy everything, paste it over, and I will explain what these commands do. Now basically what these commands are doing, you start off using master, that's your master database. If the database does not exist, we're going to go ahead and create it. Now let's create something meaningful. We'll say BOLO database, and we have to put it here too. Now, using your newly created database, BOLO database, we want to create a user. We could just put BOLO admin user with the password. This password's fine. Pass at 123. We can keep it like that. Now, we just created a new login. We also have to create a user for that login, BOLO admin user for the login that we just created. Now, we want to alter these roles to give them system admin access. Now, this means that this user will be able to create tables, delete tables, stuff like that, insert data into tables, and that's the kind of access we want to have for the user that we're using to communicate through the API. Now, we have to include that user that we're altering inside of these brackets. Go ahead and run all these commands. And next, we'll open up IntelliJ and enter in our credentials so that we can start communicating with our database through the API. If you do not have IntelliJ installed, please refer to the installation link at the top of the YouTube description. IntelliJ offers free educational licenses for those who have student emails. So all you have to do is follow the link and type in your student email to gain the license. Now, once you have IntelliJ installed, go ahead and open it. Click Open Project. Go to where you have the BOLO API directory. Highlight it and click Open. Now go ahead and explain this directory. Now, inside of source is where the application is going to be. You want to open that up, open main, and resources is where we're going to change the environment variables. First, we want to go into application dev.properties, and everything that we entered for creating our new database, we want to enter into here. So if we go to Azure Data Studio, and we copy this BOLO database, we type it into here, BOLO database. We have the same password, pass at 123. BOLO database goes here, and then for the user, we had, let's see, BOLO admin user. So if we go back to IntelliJ, we'll type in BOLO admin user, BOLO database, and then here we'll have localhost port 1433, which is where it usually runs. Our admin user, pass at 123. I'll go ahead and save. Now, what you want to do is you want to go to application.properties, make sure this is false because we're not using SSL at the moment for local testing. We only use that for production environment. Press build and press play. Now, you'll see a couple warning messages, don't worry about that. Now, if everything is working correctly, you'll see a bunch of hibernate messages. Now, what this is doing, it is migrating data to your database. Now, Tomcat is a web server, and it's starting a secure port on 80 and an insecure port in 8080. Now, we want to point our port to 8080, our URL. So basically what we do is we're going to type in localhost 8080. And if everything's working correctly, this is what we'll see. Now that this is all working, we're going to go ahead and jump to the Microsoft Windows version of how to get the API working. Since the front end is the same for Mac and Windows, we're going to leave that for the end. If you do not have a Microsoft Windows computer, you can go ahead and skip to that part. That part will be labeled a Visual Studio Code front end installation. Since MS SQL Server is native to Microsoft Windows, the installation is much more straightforward. If you do not already have SQL Server and MS SQL Server Studio installed, please find the link in the description under MS SQL Server and MS SQL Server Management Studio download. Once you have that downloaded, go to your Start menu and type in SQL. SQL Server comes with a configuration manager. Click that. We will need to change a few things before our API can communicate with our SQL database. In most cases, our Windows computer will ask for admin permission to access this console. Go ahead and click yes. And then once you're in the console, you want to go ahead and click SQL Server Configuration Manager, SQL Server Services, and just make sure your SQL Server is running. Next, you want to go to the SQL Server Network Configuration. You'll see protocols for MS SQL Server. Click that, double click it, and then make sure your TCP IP is enabled. Double click that, and then go to IP addresses, scroll all the way down, and make sure 1433 is enabled for IP all. If it's not, go ahead and double click that, type that value in, press apply, and then press OK. Next, we want to go ahead and open up Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, and then go ahead and log in. Here I have localhost, but you can have your default login that they give you. Press connect. And now the very first thing that we need to do is to make our SQL Server accessible via a SQL login. Right now, it's only via Windows authentication. We do that by opening up the Server Studio and then right-clicking localhost, or whichever you're connected to here. Click Properties, go to Security, and by default you'll have this set. You don't want that. You want SQL Server and Windows Authentication Mode. This will allow your API from IntelliJ, from your Spring Boot application, to go ahead and log in to your SQL Server instance to go ahead and communicate with the database. Press OK. And now for this to work, we need to go ahead and restart the server. So basically go right click it and then click restart. And then press yes when I ask you, are you sure you want to restart the server? You say yes. And after it's restarted, your API will be able to log into your database via SQL. The next thing we are going to do is create a database that our API can communicate with. If you don't already have this extended, extend this, and then which is extending our server, and then extend our databases. I myself already have 3 databases here, but we're going to go ahead and create another one together. Now, right click databases and then press new database. And then the name of our database, make it unique. We could say BOLO _DB. Okay. And then go ahead and press OK. Now, we need to create a system admin that'll be able to communicate with our SQL Server as well as our BOLO DB. So we'll create a user and name him BOLO _DB user. So we'll minimize this, go to the master security folder right here, go to logins, right click this and create a new login. We want to call this BOLO underscore db underscore admin. And you have to make sure that SQL Server authentication is enabled. We can say the password as pass at 123, pass at 123, make sure they're the same. Uncheck enforced password expiration, that'll give you problems in the future, but leave enforced password policy checked. Okay, make sure everything's good. Then you want to go ahead and go to server rules and check the sysadmin box. This will allow your user to access the database. Go to user mapping and check the BOLO underscore DB database that we just made. And then you want to check DB owner. This will map our user to that database. So once we go to that database, we'll see this newly created user inside of there. And then we're all good to go. So to go over that again, we made this sysadmin. We mapped our new user to the BOLO DB. And we gave them a password. And we're enforcing password policy, but not password expiration policy. Go ahead and click OK. Now, this created for the master database. Let's minimize security. Let's go back to databases. BOLO DB, expand that. Now, if we go into security for our BOLO DB, expand that, expand users, you'll see our newly created BOLO DB admin in here. Now you want to right click him, click properties, and then go to membership. Make sure that DB owner is clicked, and go to own schemas and check the DB owner checkbox as well. Let's go to general. Everything looks good here. Own schemas. Want to make sure he owns the DB owner schema. Memberships. He's the DB owner. And we're all good to go. So go ahead and press OK. And you're all set. So your user that you're going to use is BOLO underscore DB admin. And with the password of pass at 123. Next, we're going to go ahead and open IntelliJ and set the properties to connect to our database. If you do not already have IntelliJ installed, please see the installation link below under the YouTube description. Now let's open up IntelliJ and go ahead and minimize everything like we're starting from the beginning. If you see here, let me exit out of everything so you can see properly. Alrighty. Now, if you see here, expand the BOLO application. Source is where our code's going to be. Main is where our application is going to be. And then resources are where we are going to set our environment variables. Expand that and then click application dev.properties. Now, to connect to our local host, we have to put localhost. And remember earlier we put port 1433 for all. Our new database is going to be, let's make sure, BOLO underscore DB. So write that, BOLO underscore DB. And then our admin was BOLO underscore DB admin. And put whatever password you put. The one I put was pass at 123. Go ahead and press save. Alrighty. And then go ahead and go to application.properties and put require SSL false, because we are not using the security certificate for the local environment testing. That is only for the production build. Go ahead and build. Give that a second. And then once that's done, we'll go ahead and press play. You know that's done when this is green. Press play, and that'll run the application. If everything's successful, it'll open the output box. You get a couple warning messages, but that's normal. Now, once everything's successful, you'll see a bunch of Hibernate statements, and this is basically migrating data to our newly created database inside of our Microsoft SQL Server. Once everything's successful, all these Hibernate statements will complete, and Tomcat will be started on port 8080 for HTTP. So let's go to our Google Chrome or whatever browser you're using, and then we'll go ahead and type 8080 to see if that's working. And if you type in localhost 8080 and you see this, that means everything's working. Next, we'll go ahead and discuss how to get the front-end client set up so that you can see the BOLO website. Next section of this video is going to require Visual Studio Code as well as NPM, which also requires Node.js. So please, under the YouTube description, go to installing Visual Studio Code and installing Node and NPM. Once you have everything installed correctly, you want to, with your BOLO application API running in the background, you want to go to Visual Studio Code. And let's go ahead and restart everything so you can see how it looks. If you do not already have the application open, you want to go ahead and click Visual Studio Code, go to File, Open, highlight your BOLO UI directory, and click Open. Now if you hover your mouse all the way to the bottom until it has an upward pointing arrow, you want to click down and drag upward. Go ahead and make sure terminal is highlighted, and what this is a built-in terminal inside of VS Code that is really useful so you don't have to run a separate terminal. And here you can run commands that'll help your application. Now what we want to do is we want to go to the left, and inside of this directory you want to go to package.json, and I'll explain what this is. This is basically a description to NPM, which is Node Package Manager, about which dependencies your application needs to install for it to run. Now, to install these, it's one simple command. It's npm install. And what this will do, it will install all the dependencies inside a directory called node_modules that your application needs to run. Now, I already have the directory here, so it'll take a lot faster for me. So go ahead and run this, and this will install all your dependencies. Press pause on the video, and once it's done installing, go ahead and click resume. Once everything is done installing, let's go inside of the source directory inside of our application in our root folder, expand environments, and here you'll see two types of environment files. Our first one is environment.prod.ts, which is a TypeScript file, and these are the environments that we're going to be using for the production server, so we don't worry about those right now. But in environment.ts, we do want to worry about these. So back in environment.prod.ts, let's go ahead and set this to false. And then in environment.ts, let's go ahead and accept this API endpoint. It's already good to go, pointing to localhost 8080, which is where our application is running. So everything looks good to go. So all we need to do is type in ng-serve to run the application. And ng is a command that was installed when we did npm install. It's part of the Angular CLI, which is the console for AngularJS. Now once this installs, give it a second, it's going to run your application on localhost 4200. Once everything is done, you'll see this message compiled successfully. Go ahead and open Google Chrome. Now I already have mine open, but all you need to do is type in localhost 4200, press enter, and if everything is working correctly, this is what you'll see. Now, when we ran the application API in IntelliJ, it created a test user for us, and that test user was root, and with the password of all lowercase 1QAZ. Press login, and if everything is working correctly, you'll be logged into the application. Welcome to BOLO.